Imagine a name so powerful, so ancient, that it echoes through the darkest corners of history, appearing in myths, religions, and even modern pop culture. A name tied to seduction, danger, and rebellion. That name is Lilith. Whether you've heard of her as a demon of the night or the first woman ever created, Lilith's story is one that grabs your attention and refuses to let go. Today, we're diving deep into the mystery of Lilith, her origins, her transformations, and why she continues to fascinate us thousands of years later. So, grab a seat and let's uncover the enigma of Lilith together. When we talk about demonology and the shadowy figures that haunt religious texts and folklore, few stand out as much as Lilith. She's not just a name, she's a symbol, a character who has crossed cultural boundaries and left her mark on countless stories. From ancient Mesopotamia to modern movies, Lilith is everywhere, often portrayed as a seductive yet deadly force. But who is she really? Is she a monster, a rebel, or something else entirely? Let's start at the beginning and piece together her haunting tale. One of the most common images of Lilith is as a demon of the night. She's often described as a dangerous beauty, luring men with her charm, only to bring death and despair. But her darkness goes deeper. Stories say she hides in the shadows, waiting for the cover of night to steal babies and young children from their cribs. This chilling idea isn't new. It dates back to ancient Mesopotamian beliefs, where a figure named Lamashtu terrorized families. Lamashtu, sometimes called the daughter of the sky god Anu, was seen by some as an evil goddess, and by others as a pure demon. She was a nightmare for women during childbirth, snatching their newborns, draining their blood, and gnawing on their tiny bones. Even mothers and unborn children weren't safe. Lamashtu could cause miscarriages and spread misery wherever she went. She didn't stop at women either. She preyed on men, devouring their flesh and haunting their dreams until only terror remained. Sickness, disease, and death followed her like a shadow. If this sounds familiar, it's because Lamashtu's story feels like an early blueprint for creatures like vampires and succubi, and many believe she's closely tied to the legend of Lilith. Now, let's fast forward a bit to another version of Lilith that many of us might know. The idea of her as the first wife of Adam. Yes, before Eve, there was supposedly Lilith. This story comes from interpretations of the book of Genesis, the very first book in both the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament. In Genesis first, we're told that God created the heavens, the earth, plants, animals, and finally, mankind in his own image to rule over everything. Here's the key part. Genesis 1 says, God created man and woman at the same time. But then, in Genesis 2, the story changes a little. It says God created man first, and not wanting him to be alone, put him into a deep sleep, took a rib from his body, and made the first woman. So we've got two different accounts of how humans were created, one right after the other. For many believers, the Word of God can't contradict itself, so scholars over the centuries came up with an explanation. These two stories describe two separate events. This idea gave birth to a narrative that God created woman twice, first alongside man, and then from man. The woman in the first story, though not named in Genesis, later became known as Lilith. The woman in the second story, that's Eve, created from Adam's rib, as most of us have heard. This gap between the two creation stories opened the door for a lot of speculation, and that's where Lilith's tale really starts to take shape. Ancient texts and interpretations, especially from a collection of Jewish teachings called Midrash, began to fill in the blanks. In these stories, Lilith isn't just a side character, she's a rebel. When she and Adam were created together, neither wanted to submit to the other. Some say this was about who would take the lead in their relationship, while others suggest it was about something more personal, like refusing to take a submissive role during intimacy. Either way, neither would back down. Frustrated and unwilling to compromise, Lilith left the Garden of Eden. In a dramatic moment, she spoke God's true name out loud, a forbidden act, and instantly transformed into a winged demon. Angels were sent to bring her back, but she refused, declaring she had no intention of returning. As punishment for her defiance, the angels cursed her, promising to kill 100 of her demon children every day. From then on, her purpose became one of darkness. She would bring illness and death to the children of others. Stories say she claimed power over newborns for a set number of days, 8 days for boys and 20 for girls. The only way to protect a child was to have the names of those 3 angels written on a medallion or amulet. Seeing their names, Lilith would leave the child alone. But Lilith's story doesn't stop there. In other ancient texts, like the Talmud, a collection of Jewish laws and teachings, she appears as a demon with wings and a woman's face. Here, she's a danger to men, especially those sleeping alone in their homes. It's said she would seize them in their sleep, collecting their essence to create more demon offspring. This idea ties her directly to the concept of the succubus, a seductive demon who preys on men in their dreams. She's also linked to other dark figures, like a Grat, a demon of the night who targets children and the vulnerable. So, we've got 2 sides to Lilith emerging, the woman who rebelled and the demon who destroys. But how did she go from one to the other? That's where later stories, especially from the Middle Ages, roughly between the 5th and 15th centuries, come in. During this time, works like the Alphabet of Ben Sira fleshed out Lilith's story in much greater detail. They paint a picture of a woman who wouldn't bow to anyone, not even Adam or God. After fleeing Eden, her transformation into a demon made her a figure of both fear and fascination. Some saw her as a beautiful temptress, while others depicted her as a sinister, monstrous being. There are even tales that cast her as the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the one who tempted Eve with the forbidden fruit as a final act of revenge against Adam and God. As time went on, folklore began to portray Lilith as a demon queen, often paired with powerful male demons like Asmodeus, who many consider the king of demons. Mentioned in texts like the Book of Tobit and the Talmud, Asmodeus and Lilith were seen as the ultimate demonic couple, the mother and father of countless demon children. Together, they roamed from village to village, spreading chaos and destruction. In some Jewish mystical teachings, known as Kabbalah, Lilith is even linked to Samael, a complex and shadowy figure. Some say Samael, not God, created Lilith as his demonic consort, giving her a host of dark offspring, including Asmodeus himself. Through all these stories, 3 main versions of Lilith stand out. First, there's the woman who rebelled against God and Adam, a side we don't see much of, but it's there. Second, there's the seductive demoness who invades men's dreams to grow her demonic family. And third, there's the monstrous predator who targets pregnant women and devours their children. When I first came across Lilith's story, I couldn't help but notice how much she reminded me of figures from Greek mythology. Think of the harpies, hideous, bird-like creatures with a foul stench, or the sirens, whose beauty and song lure men to their doom. But the character who most closely mirrors Lilith is Lamia. Her story almost feels like a reflection of Lilith's. Lamia starts as a normal woman who falls into lust and, as punishment, loses her children. She's then turned into a monster, and in some versions, she becomes a vampire-like demon, feeding on the blood of young men or hunting children as revenge for her own loss. Like Lilith, Lamia serves as a cautionary tale, a boogeyman meant to scare people, though her story focuses more on the dangers of desire rather than rebellion. To be honest, Lilith's story can feel a bit confusing at times. The connection between her as Adam's first wife and her as a demon isn't always clear, and it's mostly thanks to later interpretations in Midrash and other writings that we can even draw a link between the two. But this hasn't stopped her from becoming a massive figure in popular culture. I was amazed when I started looking into just how often her name pops up in books, movies, TV shows, and video games. For fans of the Chronicles of Narnia, you might not know that the White Witch is described as a descendant of Adam's first wife. Yes, that's Lilith. In the TV series True Blood and the movie 30 Days of Night, Lilith is tied to vampires, which makes sense given her bloodthirsty reputation in ancient tales. This is a common theme. When she appears, it's often as a succubus or a vampire. If you're a fan of the show Supernatural, you might remember her as the first human tempted by Lucifer to become a demon. And in the show Lucifer, she is called the Mother of Demons. One portrayal I hadn't noticed before, but find really interesting, is in the sci-fi movie The Fifth Element. The character Lilu, inspired by Lilith, is linked to Adam's first wife, and even speaks ancient Aramaic. But instead of destroying humanity, she ends up saving it, flipping the traditional story on its head. Video games are another place where Lilith shows up a lot. If you've played popular titles like Final Fantasy, Borderlands, Diablo, Darksiders, or Devil May Cry, you've likely come across her name or a character inspired by her. Honestly, I think Lilith's story is captivating, even if the original sources are a bit scattered and pieced together. Whether you see her journey as a tragic fall from grace or a bold act of defiance, it's a universal theme that resonates with so many people. That's probably why she's referenced so often in modern stories. It might also have something to do with the rise of interest in the occult and fantasy genres, which often go hand in hand. I'd love to hear what you think about Lilith's story. Do you see her as a villain, a victim, or something else? Have you noticed how often she appears in the shows, games, or books you enjoy? Let me know in the comments. And if you've liked the artwork and animations in this video, I'm also thrilled to share that. Due to popular demand, many of these episodes will soon be available as podcasts on all major platforms. So, if that's something you're excited about, keep an eye out for updates. As always, I've been your host at Mythology and Fiction Explained, and I'll see you in the next video.